Hey there, it's Jason Fried from 37 Signals, and today I'm going to walk you through how we use Basecamp to manage and run our podcast. So we have a podcast called the Rework Podcast, which is at rework.fm, and we use Basecamp to essentially schedule and manage the whole thing. And I'm going to walk you through every little part of that right now. All right, so we're in Basecamp now, looking at the Basecamp project for the Rework Podcast. Okay. At the top, you'll see there's 4 people. These are the 4 people who are primarily involved with the podcast. And then there's 45 others inside the company at 37 Signals that are following along with the project. They can chime in if they want. They can drop a few things in if they want, but they're not going to get notifications. They're not going to be bugged by the project at all, but they do have access. Okay. So we've got a handful of tools set up in this particular project. And if you're familiar with Basecamp, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not, I'll go through each one in a second. And we're even using a tool that most projects don't have on. So this is kind of a nice little preview for something you may not know about with Basecamp. Okay, so first tool is we have the schedule. All right, I'm going to click on the schedule tool. And this is basically our editorial schedule for the podcast. We have what's coming up. So Tuesday, November 1st, we're going to be recording 2 episodes. You can get a little preview of what these are here. And then we have future episodes that are on the calendar, but we don't know what the topics are yet. But at least we know this is happening on the 1st. Then the 8th, 9th, 15th, 16th, etc. So that's all here scheduled on the calendar. I'll just go into an actual event. This is sort of a little bit of some of the notes on the event itself, which is, of course, about the chapter we're going to be talking about. And then it says with. So David and I and Kimberly. Kimberly's the host. David and I are the ones who are going to be talking primarily. What time's it at? We're all going to get notifications about this. So it's on our own schedule, it's on our own calendar. We can add it to our own calendar if we use an external calendar service as well. That's all handled. And if the event is rescheduled, it will show down here below as well. And we can add comments if we have questions about the episode prior to recording it. So that's what the schedule is all about. So we've got all that stuff set up right here. Okay. We've got a message board. The message board is where we make sort of big picture announcements about the podcast. So this is also an interesting look at the nice thing about Basecamp is you have a certain degree of continuity. So Sean used to host the podcast, and we recently have a new host, Kimberly. So these are all Sean's messages. Even though Sean's not here anymore, all the messages he wrote are here. So we have a full history of previous things that we've talked about the podcast. So when Kimberly comes on and takes over, she can read up and be up to speed immediately without having to forward dozens, hundreds of email threads, or force her to read back in some Slack transcript somewhere. And here, Kimberly, read back 45 days of Slack transcripts, or actually 2 years worth to get up to speed. That's, of course, not a very nice thing to do. So she can come in here and pick and choose what she wants to read based on the topics that she sees. This was actually her pitch for rebooting the podcast, some ideas she had. You can see this is sort of a good example of the kind of way we write. We kind of write in long form rather than have meetings. So we didn't have a meeting about this. We wrote this up. Scrolling down, and then there's some sort of back and forth between a few people at the company talking about the podcast idea. So that's how that works. That's the message board. We've got what's called the workflow, which is a card table, which is a feature in Basecamp 4, which is essentially our take on Kanban. And up here, people can drop in future podcast episode ideas. You'll see there's 9 potential ideas that have been shared so far. And then we have the workflow down below. So these are the ones that are scheduled. This is one that's been recorded, editing, ready to post, nothing yet, and posted and promotion. So these are the stages that we have set up. We just recently started using the card table for this, so it's not that fleshed out, but this is a good example of where people can drop in these things, and then we can move them down and take them through the process. Since pretty much everybody in the company has access to this project, other people that have ideas about podcast episodes we want to record could just come in here, add a card, and type in their ideas for a podcast episode. If we like it, we'll do it. If we don't, we'll mark it not now, and it'll go over here. Maybe we can pick it up at a future date. But that's what the workflow card table is all about. We've got a section called episodes, info, AV, etc., which is a variation on the docs and files tool we have in Basecamp. You can rename these tools, which is why we renamed it this. This has a bunch of historical things we need, important links, instructions on how to use Zencaster, the artwork for the podcast. We've got some audio clips here, a variety of different things. We also have the manuscript for the book Rework, which is where we're drawing a lot of the inspiration for the podcast from. So we can open this up and refer to something if we need to. So all of the audio, video, text-based stuff that we need for the podcast is all stored right in here. There's folders. There's stuff just on the surface. Whatever we need is stored in this one place. We don't have to go over to Dropbox to find this or Google Docs to find that or dig through an email to find something. It's all right here, as well as the schedule is right here and the message board is right here and the workflow is right here, right? We have a GitHub bot set up. We're using Campfire, which is our chat tool, just to pipe in stuff from GitHub, and that's a really easy thing to do. You can go to a Campfire, you go to the ... menu, you go to configure chatbots, and you can set all this sort of thing up if you want. So we have this piping in stuff whenever we deploy or commit something to the website for rework.fm, which is hosted here. It gets pushed into this Campfire room so we can kind of pay attention to that. And then we also have another tool, which I'm not going to open because it would reveal some personal information, so I'm not going to share that, but I'll explain it. And by the way, these phone numbers here have been scrambled for the purposes of this video, so these are not real phone numbers. But Basecamp has a tool called Email Forwards, which lets you forward emails in from the outside world into a Basecamp project. And so the way we have this set up is we have a voicemail number that we talk about on the podcast, where listeners can call and leave a voicemail, which would be a question that we might answer during the podcast. So that goes to a Google Voice message, which is then forwarded automatically as an email directly into the Basecamp project. So now we have the audio and the text transcript and the person's name and everything we need to decide if we want to include that in the future episode. So that all happens automatically, and we have that turned on as well. Down below, of course, we have project activity, which sort of shows all the stuff that's been going on in the podcast project if we want. And that's essentially every single thing we need to run and manage the podcast. Schedule, a place for big picture announcements, a place to handle the workflow and see what's being recorded, what's in progress of editing, etc., what's been posted, all the text, all the pictures, all the audio, all the history we need right here. A place to kind of make sure the website's getting updated and we can see when that thing is happening. And then a place to take listener voicemails, which are essentially Q&A fodder for us to decide if we want to answer on a future episode. And that is everything in a nutshell, all on a single page, all in a single product, all right here in Basecamp. If you have any questions about any of this, just drop something in the comments and I'd be happy to reply. Thanks again for watching, and we'll do another video soon.